Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's presentation, Securing the Modern Campus. Joining me today is Rustin Miles, Bluefin's Chief Strategy and Development Officer, as well as Tim White, who is our Director of Product Marketing. We're super excited that you can be here for today's discussion. It should take about, I would say, 35 to 40 minutes. We are re-recording this from our live webinar so that we do have it on demand. We won't have any questions at the end. We're just going to get right into it and get started with today's material. And so what we're going to be doing is talking less about, I would say, the products and technologies, although there will be a part on that, that is, people are using today to actually do some security. But we're talking at first about the evolution of the modern campus, which I think from our experience with Bluefin, we have 700 colleges and universities today that are using our products and services either directly or through our network of partners and providers, which is great. And we've grown that over the years. And many of our colleges and universities, interestingly enough, have expanded from, let's call it 5 devices in the bursar's office to 250 devices across the campus, in the hospital, in the clinic, and in dining, and in stadiums. And so we're going to frame today's discussion a little bit around that. How do you protect the sensitive data across today's connected campus? Because the campus has significantly changed. So if we think back to maybe, the 90s and the way that people were accepting payments, if you can even think about this, and I think Rustin would find this to be very interesting too, you may have had somebody sending in a check for tuition. And that could have been processed in an Excel spreadsheet and then deposited physically in the institution. And that was a method of payment. And that could have just been through the bursar's office. And then you shoot to what today's environment looks like. And it is very, very different. You have digital experiences, you have connected systems, you have locations that are accepting payments both at the point of sale and online. And it could be for everything from alumni giving to actually paying for a meal at the cafeteria. So it has really varied widely, and it has now expanded to the point where we believe at Bluefin, every department is now a data steward. And so let's let that sink in for just a second. Every department on campus is handling payment data, is handling some sort of sensitive data, and it has become a bit of a sprawl. So on one hand, you have the locations, whether it's student accounts, financial aid, housing, dining, all of that good stuff. And then on the right, you've got even more things happening: campus events, human resources, student health, all convening into this one institution. And what it comes down to is, if we look at that tagline at the bottom, security is no longer confined to one office. It has, in fact, become a campus-wide responsibility. And we believe at Bluefin, in talking to our 700 or so colleges and universities and watching this scope grow, that the connected experiences are really dependent on connected systems. And when Tim White gets into his part, where we're going to talk a little bit about what those systems are, what are the products, and how are all of those connected. But behind every payment is really a network of institutional systems, cloud applications, payment technologies, and trusted partners working together. However, and this is what we have seen, the more connected the campus becomes, the more important it becomes to protect the information that flows between those systems. We'll talk a bit about PCI compliance scope today too, and a big reason why our colleges and universities love to work with Bluefin is because our technologies like tokenization, like PCI validated point-to-point encryption, help to lower that PCI scope. But what you want to do is make sure you have that type of protection and those technologies implemented across every department that's accepting payment. And that certainly can become a challenge. And this is where I'm going to turn it over now to Rustin from that, kind of educational security piece to talk about why security must evolve with the campus. So Rustin, if you want to go ahead and take it from here.
Get myself off mute there. Thanks, Danielle. And so higher education has changed dramatically, yet many of the security strategies that we see were designed for a time when sensitive information lived in a smaller number of institution kind of controlled systems. So historically, security focused on defined locations, the data center, the network, the perimeter, and the databases inside it. So those protections remain essential still, but the modern campus also depends on cloud applications, payment providers, student systems, healthcare platforms, and other partners within that environment. And inside that environment, the institution may not control every system that touches sensitive information, but it still retains responsibility for how that information is protected. For a lot of years, security programs concentrated heavily on data at rest. They're protecting the databases, the storage, and the access to those systems where the information ultimately resides. Today, however, sensitive information spends much of its life moving. So a tuition payment, online donation, student registration, healthcare transactions that may pass between several applications and organizations and companies and vendors before the process is complete. Let's consider a student making a payment online. The student sees a single page and receives a confirmation, but the information may move through a payment form, a campus application, a payment gateway or payment processor, financial systems, reporting tools. Every handoff supports the experience, but each handoff creates another moment when the protection must remain intact. Protecting data in motion means ensuring that information remains protected throughout that entire journey, not only at its final destination. This isn't a replacement for your traditional cybersecurity controls. It's an extension of them for a campus where data is continuously exchanged. The objective here is to reduce how often sensitive information appears in readable form and how many systems must be trusted with it. So it's easy to assume that a more complex environment requires more security tools. But in practice, institutions often find that adding point solutions department by department creates overlapping controls, inconsistent practices, and even more exceptions to manage. The result can be a campus with significant security investment, but limited visibility into how those investments work together. The strongest strategies usually create greater consistency instead. They establish common principles that can be applied across systems and departments while allowing those departments to retain the applications that they need. For example, the institution may decide that sensitive payment data should be protected before it reaches campus systems, or that certain personal information should be tokenized before it is shared downstream into applications. Payment security provides a practical example. So PCI DSS remains critically important still. And reducing your PCI scope is a goal for many of you. But scope reduction is most effective when it is treated as the result of better security design rather than the sole objective on its own. The better question is, how can payments data be protected before it enters multiple campus systems? PCI validated point-to-point encryption, or P2PE, protects cardholder data at the point of interaction and keeps it protected as it moves toward processing. When fewer campus systems handle readable card data, the institution can strengthen their protection, reduce their PCI scope, and simplify the work required to maintain compliance. Bluefin has seen this become particularly valuable within the higher education space because payment acceptance is distributed across so many departments. A bursar's office, athletics program, bookstores, dining operations, health service, advancement teams, they all accept payments differently. P2PE creates an opportunity to apply a validated protection model across all those environments without asking every department to become an expert in credit card security. Every institution begins from a different place. Many campuses start by solving a specific department need, then use that success to introduce common practices across additional areas. Over time, isolated projects can become coordinated initiatives, shared governance, and eventually a consistent institutional security strategy. We describe that progression as data-centric security, protecting sensitive information according to what it is and how it moves, rather than relying solely on the application in which it happens to reside right now. A department project may therefore be a perfectly reasonable starting point, provided that the higher education institution learns from it and considers how the same principles could apply elsewhere.
Awesome. Thank you, Rustin. So the question we hear most often from institutions is not necessarily why security should evolve, but where to begin. A modern security strategy does not require a campus-wide transformation on day one. Some of the strongest programs actually begin with one meaningful opportunity, demonstrate value, and expand over time. An institution might start with a payment environment that carries significant PCI burden or a sensitive file exchange that is difficult to govern, or maybe even a workflow in which data moves through several third parties. The terminology on this slide can sound technical, but the objective is straightforward. Protect sensitive information early, limit where the original data can be seen, and apply those protections consistently as information moves. Tokenization replaces sensitive information with a non-sensitive substitute that authorized systems can still use. For example, a campus application may need to recognize that two transactions or records relate to the same person without needing access to the original account number or identifier. Vaultless format preserving tokenization can preserve the structure required by existing workflows while removing the sensitive value that attackers would otherwise seek. Encryption serves as a complementary purpose by making information unreadable without the appropriate credentials. It is especially important while data is moving between systems or when tokenization is not practical. Effective key management then ensures that the ability to unlock encrypted information remains separate, controlled, and available only to the appropriate systems and users. Encryption without strong key governance can create a false sense of security, so the two capabilities must be considered together. Data orchestration helps apply these protections consistently. Rather than asking every application or department to make an independent decision, orchestration can determine when information should be encrypted, tokenized, routed, or made available to an authorized destination. Secure API governance extends that same discipline to the connections between campus applications, cloud services, and technology partners, which are often where information crosses organizational boundaries. In Bluefin's approach, PCI-validated P2PE, vaultless tokenization, secure file protection, and orchestration can serve as complementary layers of a broader data protection strategy. Universities do not need to implement all of them at once. The important takeaway is that these capabilities can be introduced where they create the greatest value and then expanded as the institution's roadmap develops. Payment data is often the most logical place to begin because it appears across so many campus environments, including tuition, athletics, dining, parking, healthcare, continuing education, and alumni giving. These departments may use different applications in processing relationships, but all of them share the obligation to protect cardholder data. One of the most effective strategies is to protect that data at the earliest possible moment. Bluefin's PCI-validated P2PE encrypts cardholder data within the payment device before readable information can enter campus applications or networks. It remains protected as it travels to the point where authorized decryption and processing occur. The payment experience remains familiar to the student, parent, donor, or visitor, but the institution changes what happens behind the scenes. Campus systems receive protected data rather than readable card numbers, reducing the number of applications, networks, and teams exposed to cardholder information. That can lower risk, simplify PCI compliance, and reduce the operational effort required to manage encryption keys, device validation, and the ongoing P2PE requirements. Payment card information is really only one category of sensitive data managed by a university. Student, employee, donor, healthcare, and financial information also moves among campus applications, cloud platforms, files, and of course, trusted partners. In many cases, the institution needs the information to support legitimate workflows, but most of the systems involved do not need to see the original sensitive value. Vaultless format preserving tokenization can extend the same principle beyond payments by replacing sensitive values while allowing authorized applications and workflows to continue functioning. Because the token can retain the expected format, institutions may be able to protect information without redesigning every downstream application. The original value is revealed only when a clearly authorized business process requires it. File protection can apply that model to spreadsheets, exports, batch files, and data exchanges that are otherwise difficult to govern. Higher education still relies heavily on files because departments and partners need practical ways to exchange information. Rather than assuming those workflows will disappear, a data-centric strategy protects the sensitive fields within them before the file is stored or shared. The goal is not to force every type of information into the same system. It is to apply a consistent principle wherever possible. Use protected data instead of the original sensitive value. That reduces the value of information exposed in a breach, while allowing the university's legitimate operations to continue. So, a common concern is that improving security will require replacing major campus systems or launching a disruptive transformation. In most cases, the more practical approach is to strengthen the environment institutions already have. Higher education has invested years of effort and institutional knowledge in student systems, ERP platforms, healthcare applications, advancement tools, payment technologies, and even specialized departmental software. Those platforms support essential operations, and replacing them simply to improve data protection is rarely realistic. The security strategy should therefore complement the ecosystem rather than compete with it. Bluefin is designed to work across a broad partner ecosystem, allowing P2PE, tokenization, file protection, and orchestration to integrate with existing applications, processors, gateways, and campus technology providers. That vendor-agnostic approach is important because universities often need to preserve different relationships across departments while still creating greater consistency in how sensitive data is protected. So, as these capabilities expand, security begins to shift from a collection of departmental implementations to a common institutional strategy. Payment protection, tokenization, file security, secure integrations, and orchestration can work together to create greater consistency without requiring every department to operate identically. This is where orchestration becomes especially valuable. A campus may accept card-present payments at a ticket office or clinic, card-not-present payments through an online portal or call center, and sensitive personal information through forms, files, or maybe APIs. Orchestration can apply policy to how those protected data flows move across applications and partners while limiting access to the original information. For payment workflows, that may include supporting different devices, gateways, or processors while maintaining a common security model. For sensitive data beyond payments, it may mean controlling when tokenization or detokenization occurs and ensuring that only an authorized system receives the original value. In both cases, the institution gains a governed layer that connects existing technologies rather than replacing them. So every institution starts from a different place, and there is no universal roadmap. One university may begin with payment security in a single department, while another may focus on sensitive files or a high-risk data flow or consistency across several business units. The most successful programs identify a manageable opportunity, define what success will look like, and then they build from there. That first initiative should be meaningful enough to demonstrate value, but contained enough that the institution can also learn from it. Measures might include fewer systems in PCI scope, less readable sensitive data in campus environments, simpler audit preparation, improved visibility, or even just reduced manual effort. This is how Bluefin typically begins working with an institution. By understanding the current ecosystem, identifying where sensitive data enters and moves, and determining which initiative can create the greatest practical value first. The conversation is consultative because the right starting point depends on the campus's technology, governance, priorities, and their available resources. So with that in mind, I'll turn the discussion now back to Rustin, who will actually translate the roadmap into a near, mid, and long-term action roadmap.
Awesome. Let's talk about quick wins. The first 30 days are about visibility and focus, not a campus-wide overhaul. The objective is to understand enough of the environment to make a sound first decision that can address areas where improvement is immediately achievable. With this approach, you would begin by selecting a few representative workflows such as athletics ticketing, online giving, dining, student health, and document where sensitive data is collected, which systems use it, where it is stored, where it moves outside to your partners. This inventory does not need to be perfect. A directionally accurate view of the highest risk workflows is far more useful than waiting months for an exhaustive map that may already be outdated by the time it's finished. As teams trace those workflows, they should ask practical questions. Does every system need the original sensitive values? Are files, logs, or test environments creating copies that no one intended? Are there integrations that are no longer used but still have active credentials? Is critical activity being logged in a way the institution could review during an incident? These questions often reveal opportunities to reduce exposure without changing the entire business process. Identity and access also provide a high value area for early action. Institutions can review whether multi-factor authentication or MFA is consistently applied, whether inactive or shared user accounts remain open, and whether employees, contractors, and technology partners retain access that they no longer need. This is not an IT exercise. Business owners can help confirm whether access still reflects the person's role and whether third-party permissions still remain appropriate. By the end of the first month, your institution should have a clearer view of several important data flows, a short list of immediate improvements, and 1 or 2 priorities for further work. The purpose is to replace assumptions with evidence and create momentum for the next phase of the roadmap. Over the next 3 to 6 months, the focus shifts from individual findings to repeatable practices. This is where an institution begins turning early wins into an operating model that can be applied across departments and systems. One priority may be expanding P2PE, tokenization, or encryption into additional high-risk workflows. An institution might begin with payment data in one department and then evaluate another area with similar exposure, or extend tokenization to information moving through an ERP, advancement platform, healthcare workflows, or shared file processes. Each additional environment that can use protected data instead of the original sensitive values reduces the cumulative breach surface. This is also an appropriate time to examine unnecessary complexity. Universities often accumulate overlapping tools, dashboards, processes as departments adopt technologies independently. Consolidation does not necessarily mean selecting one tool for everything. It means identifying where duplication creates noise, where logs are fragmented, and where central teams lack enough visibility to connect activity across systems. Third-party relationships should be a part of the midterm review as well. Colleges and universities depend on an extensive network of software providers, payment partners, cloud platforms, and specialized applications. Institutions can strengthen those relationships by documenting what data each partner receives, clarifying how it's protected, confirming the access requirements, and ensuring that security expectations are reflected in contracts, during onboarding, and of course, the ongoing governance of that relationship. Incident response plans should also be updated to reflect the environment that the institution actually operates today. A plan written primarily around an on-campus network may not fully address a compromised cloud application, vendor accounts, API connections, or file exchanges. Finance, IT, security, procurement, communications, and departmental owners should understand their roles when an incident crosses organizational boundaries. By the end of this phase, the institution should be moving beyond isolated projects. It should have clearer ownership, repeatable standards, and a prioritized plan for expanding protection. The first 30 days establish visibility. The following 3 to 6 months begin building structural resilience. Over the longer term, institutions can move toward a coordinated security architecture in which sensitive information is protected when it first enters the ecosystem and remains protected as it moves around it. This does not mean centralizing every application or requiring every department to follow an identical workflow. It means establishing common protections and governance that apply across a diverse environment. Tokenization and encryption limit exposure, while orchestration applies policy across applications, files, payment channels, and trusted partners. In a mature model, the original data is made available only when an authorized process genuinely requires it. That reduces dependence on the security of every downstream system and allows the institution to adopt new services without automatically expanding the number of places where sensitive data exists. Long-term maturity also makes compliance and oversight less manual. Consistent records of how data is accessed, protected, and transferred can improve your audit readiness and help institutions demonstrate that controls are operating as intended. Rather than assembling evidence only when PCI, HIPAA, GLBA, or other review occurs, the institution gradually builds an environment in which relevant evidence is generated through normal operations. Centralized governance of encryption keys, access policies, and detokenization permissions further strengthens that foundation. Campus leaders don't need to manage the cryptographic details themselves, but they should have confidence that no individual application, vendor, or department can independently bypass the controls that are protecting the sensitive information. Governance should remain durable even as personnel, applications, and external partners change. Visibility across the ecosystem is equally important. Institutions should be able to understand how sensitive information is being used across cloud platforms, campus systems, third-party services, and departmental workflows. That does not require one enormous dashboard or vendor controlling the entire environment. It requires the ability to connect relevant information so that leaders can identify unusual activity, understand the potential exposure of it, and make informed decisions. Bluefin's broader vision is to help schools, campuses, colleges, universities, and institutions create this governed protection layer while preserving the flexibility of the departments and technologies that support the university's mission. A mature data-centric security strategy is not measured by the number of tools deployed. It is measured by how consistently the institution protects sensitive information and how confidently it can adopt new services without rebuilding its security approach each time. So as we conclude, there are 4 ideas we hope you'll take back to your campus. First, the modern university is a connected ecosystem, and security must account for how data moves across that. Second, every department contributes to protecting institutional trust, even when technology and security teams provide the central governance. Third, modernization can build on the systems already in place rather than requiring the campus to start over. And fourth, finally, progress is best achieved through a practical roadmap that begins with visibility and expands over time. Data-centric security brings those ideas together. It protects information according to its sensitivity and movement, reduces unnecessary exposure, and creates a more consistent foundation for innovation. Technologies such as P2PE, tokenization, and encryption, file protection, and orchestration are valuable because they make that principle operational. But the strategy begins with understanding the institution's data and deciding where protection can create the greatest value. Thanks again for joining us today. We hope this has provided a practical framework that you can begin applying. And at this point, hand it back to Danielle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rustin and Tim. Folks, we hope that you really enjoyed today's presentation. Feel free to visit our website, bluefin.com. Learn more about our solutions for higher education under industries. And again, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Rustin. And we hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.